In a city that never sleeps, the loudest truths are often hidden in the softest neon whispers of the night. We bring those secrets into the light, revealing the raw emotions behind the glowing lights. Subscribe today and listen closely to the stories the city hides.
I was reorganizing Mom's medicine cabinet when my sister texted, headed to Bali with Derek. Already transferred the savings, don't wait up. I read it twice, set down the pill organizer, and smiled at my phone. Then I typed back, funny, I moved everything to a new account Thursday. She didn't respond for 6 hours. Let me back up, because the story doesn't start with that text. It starts the way most family disasters do, slowly, then all at once. My mother's name is Carol. She's 61, recently retired from 28 years as a school librarian, and she was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's last spring. Not the kind that puts you in a wheelchair overnight. The kind that creeps. The kind that makes you spill your coffee and laugh it off, then lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering what comes next. Mom handled the diagnosis the way she handled everything. Quietly, practically, and with a grocery list. She made appointments. She adjusted her diet. She started physical therapy on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she called me. I'm the older one. My name is Rachel. I'm 32. I work in healthcare administration, which means I understand insurance paperwork in a way that most people find either impressive or deeply sad. I live 40 minutes from Mom. I know her doctor's names, her pharmacy hours, her neighbor's dog's name. I show up. My sister Vanessa is 29. She lives 12 minutes from Mom and has been there approximately 11 times in the past year, and 4 of those were to borrow things. Vanessa is the kind of beautiful that makes people assume she's also kind. She has Derek, who sells something involving software and talks about it at every dinner. They take 2 vacations a year, always somewhere with an infinity pool, always posted on Instagram before the plane lands. After Mom's diagnosis, the 3 of us sat down together at Mom's kitchen table. Mom had a notebook. She'd printed out her account statements, her insurance summary, her investment portfolio. Mom was a librarian. She believed in documentation. She had a savings account with just over $180,000 in it, a combination of 30 years of careful living, a small inheritance from my grandmother, and the payout from selling the house I grew up in when she downsized 4 years ago. It wasn't a fortune, but for a retired school librarian on a fixed income facing a progressive neurological illness, it was everything. It was her security. It was the difference between dignity and dependence. Mom wanted to add both of us to the account as joint holders so that if something happened to her, if she had a bad episode, if she was hospitalized, if things progressed faster than expected, someone could access funds immediately to cover her care. She trusted us both equally. That was the word she used. Equally. I remember the specific feeling of sitting at that table, the autumn light through the yellow curtains, the smell of the coffee Mom always made too strong. The way Vanessa reached over and squeezed Mom's hand and said, "Of course, Mom, whatever you need." And I remember thinking that it sounded genuine, because at the time, I believed it was. We both signed the paperwork that week. Things were fine for a while. I managed Mom's appointment calendar. I refilled prescriptions when she forgot. I handled the back and forth with her neurologist's office about a medication adjustment in December. Vanessa would call Mom on Sundays, usually for about 12 minutes, and occasionally bring over food that was either too spicy for Mom's stomach or required refrigeration. Mom didn't have space for, but she called. She showed up sometimes. I told myself it was enough. The shift was gradual enough that I almost missed it. In January, Vanessa mentioned, casually, over the phone, not even a real conversation, just something dropped into the middle of a sentence about something else, that she and Derek were thinking about renovating their kitchen. She said they were a little tight that month. I didn't think anything of it. In February, I was helping Mom balance her checkbook. Mom still does it by hand, in a little green ledger she's kept for 30 years. I noticed a withdrawal I didn't recognize. $1,200, mid-month, from the joint savings. When I asked Mom about it, she got a little quiet and said Vanessa had needed it for something urgent, a car thing. She didn't want to make it a big deal. I didn't make it a big deal. In March, I happened to glance at the account balance when I was setting up an auto pay for Mom's new physical therapy copays. The balance was lower than I expected. Not dramatically, not obviously, but lower. I started paying attention. I didn't snoop. I didn't go looking for something to be angry about. I just started noting dates and amounts when I logged in to manage Mom's bills. And what I found over the following 6 weeks was a pattern. Small withdrawals, irregular intervals, never large enough to trigger any kind of alert. $800 here, $1,500 there, $600 on a Tuesday for no apparent reason. In total, between January and mid-April, $9,200 had left that account in withdrawals I couldn't account for from Mom's actual expenses. I asked Mom again. She was sitting in her chair by the window doing a crossword. She didn't look up right away. When she did, there was something in her face I hadn't seen before, something between embarrassment and exhaustion. She said Vanessa had been going through a hard time, that Derek's commission had been unpredictable, that she hadn't wanted to worry me, that it wasn't that much, really, in the big picture. I sat on the ottoman across from her and I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked her, as gently as I knew how, whether Vanessa had asked for the money or taken it. Mom looked back down at her crossword. That was my answer. I drove home and I sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for about 20 minutes. I want to be honest about what I was feeling, because it wasn't just anger. It was grief. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with realizing someone you love has been slowly becoming someone you don't recognize. I wasn't ready to call Vanessa a thief yet. I was still trying to find the version of the story where she was just struggling, just temporarily irresponsible, just someone who would be horrified when confronted and immediately make it right. I called her. She answered on the third ring, voice bright and easy, the way she always sounds when she doesn't know there's a problem incoming. I told her I'd been reviewing Mom's account for billing purposes and noticed some unfamiliar withdrawals. I kept my voice neutral. I used the word noticed deliberately. I gave her every possible exit ramp. She took a breath. Then she said, Mom had offered. She said Mom knew about everything and was totally fine with it. She said it was a loan and she was planning to pay it back. She said it was a loan and she was planning to pay it back. She said I was being paranoid. She said, and I remember this exact phrasing, that I had always had a problem with not being the one in control. I told her I thought we should probably get aligned on what the money was being used for, just so we could both support Mom's care plan effectively. She said sure, absolutely. She'd call me next week to go over it. She did not call me next week. She didn't call the week after that either. What she did do in early May was book a 12-day trip to Bali for herself and Derek, business class. I know this because Derek posted about the flight upgrade on Instagram before they even boarded. I found out about the trip on a Thursday evening when I stopped by Mom's with groceries. Mom was quieter than usual. She had the television on but wasn't watching it. She was holding her phone. I asked her what was wrong. She said Vanessa had called to let her know she was going to be traveling for a while. She handed me the phone. There was a text chain. I scrolled up. Vanessa had told Mom the trip was for Derek's work, that it was mostly business with a few days of leisure, that she'd call when she landed, that she loved her. She had also, in a message 3 days earlier that Mom had apparently not fully understood, told Mom she'd moved some of the shared funds to cover the travel logistics. The message was written in that breezy run-on way Vanessa texts, everything lowercase, lots of dashes, designed to feel casual and therefore not alarming. But I'm in healthcare administration. I read documents for a living. I understood exactly what that sentence meant. I kissed Mom on the top of her head and told her I needed to step outside to make a call. I stood on Mom's front porch in the early May dark, and I checked the account from my phone. The balance was $58,000 from $180,000. She had taken, I am still careful about that word, but I'm going to use it, she had taken $122,000 in a single transfer. 3 days ago, when I'd last checked, 2 weeks prior, it had been at $171,000. So between my last check and this moment, she had also moved an additional $4,000 I hadn't noticed yet, and then the $118,000 lump sum transfer. I stood very still on that porch for a long time. Here's what I want to explain, because I think people sometimes hear a story like this and wonder why the person didn't see it coming sooner, didn't act faster, didn't prevent it. And the honest answer is that there is something uniquely paralyzing about watching someone you grew up with do something you cannot fully believe they are doing. Every step of the way, there was a part of me, a hopeful, exhausted, still loving part, that was looking for the explanation that made this something other than what it was. That part of me went quiet on that porch. I went back inside. I helped Mom heat up the soup I'd brought. I sat with her through the news and half of a home renovation show she likes. I made sure her medications were in order for the week. I made sure she had my number written on the notepad by her phone. even though she has it memorized. I told her I loved her and that everything was going to be okay. And then I drove home and I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia. I've known her for 4 years through work. She is methodical, unsentimental, and excellent. I explained the situation in the same tone I use at work when I'm presenting a complicated insurance dispute. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." What followed was 4 days of paperwork and very few hours of sleep. Patricia filed for an emergency protective order on Mom's behalf, naming Vanessa's recent transfer as a potentially exploitive transaction given Mom's medical diagnosis, her age, and the circumstances of the access. We contacted Mom's bank with the documentation. We opened a new account in Mom's name only. I was removed as a joint holder at my own request, replaced by Patricia's firm as a fiduciary during a legal process. Every remaining dollar in the old account was frozen pending review. All $58,000 of it. Mom was the hardest part of those 4 days. Not because she was angry at me, she wasn't, but because she was heartbroken in a way that was so quiet and so deep that it was almost worse than anger would have been. She asked me once, in a very small voice, whether I thought Vanessa knew what she was doing, whether she'd planned it. I didn't answer her right away. I asked her instead what she wanted the outcome to be. What she actually wanted, not what she felt she was supposed to want. She said she wanted her money back. She said she wanted to be able to pay for her own care. She said she was tired of feeling like a burden and like a fool at the same time. I told her she was neither. She said, I know that. But I still feel it. I'm telling you this part because I think it's important. It's easy to make a story like this into a clean revenge narrative. The villain gets caught, the hero wins, roll credits. But what actually happens is that a 61-year-old woman who spent her whole life being careful and responsible sits in her living room and has to reckon with the fact that her younger daughter looked at her diagnosis as an opportunity. That's not satisfying. That's just sad. And any version of this story that leaves that out is leaving out the whole point. Vanessa and Derek landed in Bali on a Friday. I know this because Derek posted a video of the hotel room. It was a private villa. There was a pool that appeared to be inside the room, or possibly the room was inside the pool. It was genuinely hard to tell. There were flower petals on the bed. Derek said the phrase, "living our best life," directly into the camera. Vanessa laughed in the background. The card they attempted to use for the villa payment was declined. The second card was also declined. I know this because Vanessa called me on Saturday morning at 4 a.m. my time. I was asleep. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let that go to voicemail. She called again. I let that go to voicemail too. The third time, I picked up. Her voice was different. The brightness was gone. What was underneath it was something I hadn't heard from her in a long time, not since we were kids, not since the times when she'd actually messed something up and knew it. She sounded young. She sounded scared. She said there was a problem with the account. I said I knew. She said the hotel was asking for payment and she couldn't access the funds. I said I knew. She said, "Rachel, what did you do?" I want to be careful about how I describe my own state of mind in that moment because I know how it's going to sound. But the truest thing I can say is that I was not happy. I was not triumphant. I was tired in the deepest possible way. And I was sitting in the dark in my apartment, and I was thinking about my mother's face when she said she felt like a burden and a fool. I said, I protected Mom. There was a silence on the line. Then Vanessa said it was just a loan. She said Mom knew. She said she was going to pay it back. I said that a $122,000 transfer made 3 days before an international trip, without any loan documentation, without any repayment schedule, taken from the account of a woman with a progressive neurological illness who did not meaningfully consent, was not a loan. I said Patricia had a different word for it. I said the bank had a different word for it too. Another silence. Derek said something in the background. I couldn't hear what. Vanessa said very quietly that she needed access to some funds to pay for the hotel and get home. I said I didn't have access to the account anymore. I said she'd need to sort out her travel situation using her own resources. I said that when she returned to the U.S., she should contact Patricia's office directly and that she should probably also retain her own attorney. She said, "You're really going to do this to me?" And I said, "You did this. I just made sure it didn't work." I hung up. I sat in the dark for a while. Then I made tea and watched the sun come up, which felt like the right thing to do. Vanessa and Derek flew home 4 days later, 11 days ahead of schedule. I don't know exactly how they paid for it. I assume credit cards. I assume it was uncomfortable. The legal process took several months. I'm not going to walk through all of it because some of it is still ongoing, and Patricia would have thoughts about me discussing it publicly. What I can tell you is that the $122,000 was recovered in full through a combination of legal pressure and the fact that Vanessa, to her credit, in this one specific and narrow way, did not want the alternative. The alternative being charges that would have been significantly more difficult to explain at future job interviews or on future mortgage applications. The $9,200 in earlier withdrawals is a separate matter still being resolved. Mom's account is in good shape. Her care is funded. Her medications are covered. Her Tuesday and Thursday physical therapy appointments continue. Her neighbor's dog is named Biscuit, and he still comes to see her on weekends, and she still saves the heels of her bread for him. Vanessa and I don't talk. This is not a dramatic estrangement with a big confrontation and slam doors. It is just the quiet, permanent kind of distance that forms when someone shows you exactly who they are in a moment of crisis, and you cannot find a way back from what you saw. Maybe that changes someday. I'm not going to say it won't, but I'm also not going to pretend I'm spending time hoping for it right now. Mom and I had dinner last Tuesday. She made chicken and rice, which she's been making since I was 7. Same recipe, same slightly too much garlic. We watched half of a documentary about the national parks that she fell asleep in the middle of. I covered her with the blanket from the couch, turned off the TV, washed the dishes, and let myself out. On the drive home, I thought about something she had said at dinner. She'd been talking about the situation, not directly, the way she does, sideways, through some other topic, and she said that she used to think the hardest thing about getting older was the physical part, the things your body stops doing. But she said now, she thought the hardest part was learning which things you'd been wrong about for a long time. Learning to carry that without letting it make you bitter. She said she was working on it. I think about that a lot. What it means to be wronged by someone you loved without condition and to still refuse to become someone who stops loving. What it costs. What it builds in you. Over time, if you do it right. I can't tell you I figured it out. I'm 32 and I am very much still figuring things out. What I know is this. The money was never the point. The money was just the part that made it impossible to keep looking away. And sometimes the most protective thing you can do for someone you love is to stop pretending, stop accommodating, stop waiting for the version of events that lets everyone off the hook, and just act. Quietly. Legally. Completely. My mother is safe. Her bills are paid. Her future is as protected as the present allows. That's enough. For right now, that is exactly enough.